Suddenly, a strand of sword intent seeped out from within Yang Yi. The old man shook his head slightly and was about to speak. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically, and he instantly dispersed his technique. Meanwhile, his hair had instantly turned from black to snow white. Moreover, there were even many times more wrinkles on his face. He seemed like he'd instantly aged 100 years. What sword intent is that? The old man's eyes had shock in them. Decay sword intent. Yang Yi walked over to the old man and stretched out his hand. You've lost. Is that the might of the laws? Asked the old man. Yang Yi nodded in response. The old man gazed at Yang Yi for a short while, and then he shook his head and laughed bitterly. I never expected that you'd actually comprehended the energy of the laws, and it's even such a powerful law. I've really lost this time. I didn't have much lifespan left, and now I have very little left. This is my fate. As he spoke, he passed the Saint Spirit fruit to Yang Yi and said, Go on. It's best if you don't stay in the city. While there aren't many here who can kill you, there aren't a few either. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man went back to his sling chair and laid down on it. Senior, are you from Profounder Continent? Asked Yang Yi. Yes. The old man continued. I know what you're wondering. The reason I'm letting you go is because you're from Profounder Continent, and you're protecting it. I can't step forward and help Profounder Continent, and this is all I can do. Good luck on the rest. The old man closed his eyes once he finished speaking. Yang Yi bowed slightly to the old man, and then he turned around and left the pavilion. Profounder Continent. The old man opened his eyes once more when Yang Yi left, and there were ripples in his eyes as he seemed to be recollecting events of the past. After he left the Technique Pavilion, Yang Yi immediately hid himself and traveled to the entrance of the city. At this moment, the area there was truly covered in corpses and flooded with blood. Moreover, countless severed limbs covered the ground while the buildings in the vicinity had been blasted into bits. It was a complete mess. Both sides weren't fighting anymore, and they were just standing in confrontation. Even though the defiant Profounders had lost some forces, even more defiant Profounders had entered the city. So, there were over 4,000 defiant Profounders here right now, whereas the Hallowed Grounds had even more forces. It had over 10,000 experts on its side, while more half-saints were rushing over from all directions from time to time. Yang Ye's brows knit tightly together as he stood in the shadows. Why have they stopped fighting? Suddenly, he raised his head and looked up into the sky. He sensed two extremely powerful auras in the distant sky, and their auras were even stronger than Elder Mu and Lu Yen. They are negotiating? Yang Ye's heart sank. Even though there was deep-rooted enmity between the defiant Profounders and the Hallowed Grounds, they had a similar objective as well. It was to break open the heaven path and charge into the outer heavens. Under such circumstances, it was absolutely possible for them to join forces. Moreover, once that happens, then it would undoubtedly be a calamity for Profounder Continent. Everyone, move out of the city. Suddenly, a voice resounded from high above in the sky. Yang Ye's heart instantly sank to rock bottom when he heard this. Obviously, they'd come to an agreement. While the defiant Profounders were unwilling, they didn't dare disobey an order from that person who spoke, so they immediately retreated from the city. Meanwhile, another voice resounded in the sky. Kill Yang Yi and reclaim the Stone of Suppression. Don't let others laugh at our hallowed grounds. Supreme Exalt He and Supreme Exalt Mu's hearts shook, and they hurriedly nodded. After the defiant Profounders left, the experts of the hallowed grounds left as well. Meanwhile, Supreme Exalt He and Mu led over 100 half-saints to search madly for Yang Yi throughout the city. No one noticed that almost half of the intact corpses around the entrance to the city had vanished. After he left the ancient city of Hallows, Yang Yi traveled swiftly all the way until they reached a mountain range that was a few thousand kilometers away from the city. Yang Yi sat cross-legged on a huge rock while his face was covered in happiness and excitement. Because he'd obtained a total of almost 1,000 half-saint corpses this time. 1,000 corpses were equivalent to 1,000 half-saint sword servants. How could he not be excited and happy? But it didn't take long for him to calm down. Because he'd thought of one thing, and it was that the defiant profounders and the hallowed grounds might have come to an agreement. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to stop fighting. If that was true, then it meant that profounder continent was in danger, huge danger. 1,000 half-saint sword servants were nothing to the defiant profounders and the hallowed grounds, unless all of them were mid-grade half-saints. Brilliant light surged in Xianxia's eyes when he thought up to this point. If it was any other person, it would naturally be impossible to make 1,000 half-saint puppets advance to the mid-grade half-saint realm. But he could, because he had primordial violet energy. Xianxia summoned the sword spirit and said, "I'll leave those corpses to you. I have to improve my strength first." As he spoke, he withdrew the saint spirit fruit and said, "I hope its effects aren't too bad." The sword spirit gestured slightly with her hand, and the fruit instantly flew into her grasp. She gazed at it for a short while before she passed it back to Xianxia. "There's nothing wrong with it. However, it isn't realistic for you to rely on it to advance into the half-saint realm. You have to rely on your own comprehension and fortune to advance into the half-saint realm. Relying on external forces to advance by force is very difficult and very bad for you." Xianxia said, "I never hoped that it could advance my cultivation to the half-saint realm. I'll be satisfied if it can just help me rise a single rank." He had very little primordial violet energy within him right now, and it was utterly insufficient for those 1,000 sword servants to attain the mid-grade half-saint realm. So, he had to place his hopes on advancing in his cultivation, because he would obtain a huge amount of primordial violet energy with every rank he gained. The sword spirit said, "I'm able to sense that the aura of life within the hallowed grounds is growing lesser and lesser. It'll take half a month at most for everyone besides those within the ancient city of Hallows to be exterminated. At that time, it'll be a moment of life and death for profounder continent." Xianxia asked, "What are you trying to say?" The sword spirit answered, "You possess quintessence violet energy, even though you aren't a half-saint, but you're stronger than half-saints. So long as you give up on those people on profounder continent, then you'll have an opportunity to escape this world once the defiant profounders and hallowed grounds utilizes the blood, resentment, and baleful energy of those people to break open the heaven path. I know that you won't abandon your wives. However, you can place them within the primordial pagoda. In that way, not only can all of you live, you wouldn't have to face the outer heavens forces. Isn't that a win-win situation?" Xianxia gazed at her for a short while, and then he said, "I'm no savior, and I've never thought about being one. I don't feel anything even if so many have died at the hallowed grounds. The defiant profounders can kill the members of the hallowed grounds, and I can watch as they slaughter them. However, they can't kill the people on profounder continent." "Why?" asked the sword spirit in a low voice. Xianxia said, "A long time ago, I told them that if they followed me, then I wouldn't abandon them no matter what. The Demon Emperor, the Founding Emperor, the Sword Sect, the Ding Clan. They didn't betray me when I was in my weakest state and suffered the most difficulties. So, how can I abandon them in the face of danger? If I do, then they would die. I can treat the lives of some as worthless grass, but the lives of some are worthy of me using my own life to protect. Even if we will lose in the end or even die, I won't regret my decision." When he spoke up to this point, his voice sounded slightly heavier. "A man should feel no shame before the gods, the world, and himself. Those who bully and humiliate me will suffer 10 times the retribution, and those who help me will gain 10 times the repayment. All right, you're really manly and very great. Let me see how you fight the hallowed grounds and the defiant profounders." She glared fiercely at Xianxia, and then she started to refine the sword servants. Xianxia shook his head, and then he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Sword spirit, I met your past master." Her expression instantly changed. It became gloomy and ruthless, and there was even surging killing intent in her eyes. Xianxia sighed lightly and said, "He asked me to tell you something. He said that he wronged you all those years ago, and—" "Shut up." She suddenly pointed her finger at him. A ray of light smashed against Xianxia's chest, and it blasted him flying. Bang! He flew for almost 1 kilometer before he collided with a small hill, and then he crashed to the ground. You! Yang Yi had just stood up when she appeared in front of him. At the same time, there was a sword placed against his throat. Where is he? She stared fixedly at him with an emotionless gaze, and her voice was icy cold like 10,000-year-old ice. He's dead, Yang Yi said. Completely gone. He's dead. She was slightly stunned, and then she roared madly with laughter as if she'd gone mad. Yang Yi sighed softly. The more she acted like this, the more he realized that their relationship was definitely extremely good all those years ago. Unfortunately, he'd sacrificed her for this world, and that was why the sword spirit had such resentment and hatred for him. She's a very pitiable sword. Yang Yi said, I know that you definitely refuse to have another master, and I don't want to be that master as well. You can leave whenever you want. Of course, it's best if you stay behind, because I really do need your help. If you can save Profounder Continent by sacrificing me now, then what would you do? She suddenly stared him in the eyes. Yang Yi shook his head and spoke without the slightest hesitation. I wouldn't sacrifice you. I'll use my own way to save the continent and not rely on the sacrifice of someone to accomplish something. Of course, if I have to sacrifice the members of the hallowed grounds, then I wouldn't hesitate at all. She laughed coldly and her face was covered in doubt. Yang Yi shrugged and said, It doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. Remember that we're only working together, and I'll get rid of you once we're done. She glanced coldly at Yang Yi, and then she turned around and started refining the sword servants. She's clearly a sword, but why does she seem like a real woman? Yang Yi shook his head and stopped lingering on this question. He swallowed the Saint Spirit fruit, and then a strand of extremely powerful spirit energy instantly appeared within him. After that, Yang Ye's eyes instantly opened wide, because his cultivation had actually advanced immediately, the 8th rank of the monarch rank. Yang Yi was quite stunned by this advancement. He really hadn't imagined that the Saint Spirit fruit would actually be so terrifying. After all, he'd only just consumed it, yet the energy which erupted from it had instantly allowed him to advance to the 8th rank of the monarch realm. After a moment of shock, he was overjoyed, because he noticed that he'd suddenly gained a huge amount of primordial violet energy after the advancement. Yang Yi had a feeling that it was the primordial pagoda's way of urging him to cultivate. It gave a little primordial violet energy to him after every advancement. This made him have no choice but to do all he could to improve his strength. Because the primordial violet energy could save his life, Yang Yi focused his mind, discarded the distracting thoughts within it, and started concentrating on cultivating. Outside the ancient city of Hallows, Supreme Exalt He and Mu stood before the gates while 50 white-robed old men stood by each of their sides. Every single white-robed old man was a mid-grade half-saint. Supreme Exalt He gazed at the 100 white-robed old men and said, I'm very well aware of the strength that all of you possess. Even I and Brother Mu aren't a match for all of you if you join forces. However, what I'm trying to say is that you must not be careless when you encounter Yang Yi, and you must not act on your own. Even though he's only a monarch realm profounder, his strength is sufficient to kill half-saints. Coupled with the stone of suppression and the half-saint puppets he possesses, even a mid-grade half-saint is no match for him. He paused for a moment when he spoke up to this point. He has repeatedly acted against our hallowed grounds, and he even caused us to suffer heavy losses. Not only would we be unable to rest in peace while he's still alive, the hallowed grounds would live eternally in shame until he's eliminated. His concealment technique is extremely formidable. We can't do anything to him if he stays hidden. One of the old men spoke solemnly. Supreme Exalt He waved his right hand, and then 5 talismans appeared in the hands of every single white-robed old man. He said, These are divine light talismans that were crafted by Grandmaster Shun Mo. So long as he shows himself, you just have to tear this talisman apart and he wouldn't be able to conceal himself within an area of 500 kilometers. That makes things easier. That old man nodded. Supreme Exalt He glanced at them and said, One last reminder. Don't underestimate him when you do find him and don't act rashly. You must notify us at the first possible moment. Understood. They voiced their agreement before transforming into rays of light that vanished into the sky. Supreme Exalt, he withdrew his gaze, and there was a trace of ferocity in his eyes. Xianxia, you'll die a graveless death this time. On a mountain range that was located thousands of kilometers away from the ancient city of Halos, a voice suddenly resounded. The person who kills Xianxia will be rewarded with a life essence pill. I'll be taking that pill. A figure shot into the sky and vanished into the horizon. Moreover, many other figures flew off behind him. Nameless city. There were only 3 people in a hall. The blind old man, Xianxia, and the headless person. That fellow, Xianxia, almost made the defiant profounders and the hallowed grounds suffer heavy losses. If it was in the past, I would naturally be happy to see something like that happen. Yet now. In short, if he isn't eliminated, then he might spoil our plans. The blind old man spoke solemnly. The defiant profounders and the hallowed grounds have acted, so why should we interfere? Said the headless person. The blind old man replied, but don't forget that Xianxia has the stone of suppression. It isn't a huge threat to us while it's in Xianxia's hands, but if it falls into the hands of the hallowed grounds or defiant profounders, then we might fall under the control of others. The headless man and Xianxia fell silent. The blind old man continued. So, the stone of suppression absolutely can't be allowed to fall into their hands. What do all of you think? You intend to kill Xianxia? Asked the headless person. I just want the stone of suppression. The old man said, of course, I'll have no choice but to seize it if he refuses to give it to me. So, whether he'll be able to live is up to him. As he spoke, the blind old man vanished from within the hall. The headless person asked, what do you think about all of that? No one can stop the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders from completing their plan, said Xianxia. The headless person stood up and walked towards the exit. The members of the hallowed grounds are almost completely annihilated. It's time to deal with the people in this city. At this moment, Xianxia naturally didn't know that his actions in the ancient city of Halos had made these forces start to dispatch their experts to pursue and kill him. Xianxia's aura was growing stronger and stronger as he sat on the huge rock. The energy that erupted from the Saint Spirit fruit was surging through his body like a tsunami, and he was ceaselessly absorbing that energy. Just like that, 3 days passed. Bang! An extremely terrifying aura surged out from within Xianxia, and that aura swept out in all directions. In an instant, everything in an area of 50 kilometers around Xianxia was destroyed. The 9th rank of the Monarch Realm. At this moment, Xianxia had attained the 9th rank of the Monarch Realm, and the aura within him was ceaselessly growing stronger. The Sword Spirit and Ding Xiaoyao appeared by Xianxia's side. Is he trying to charge into the Half-Saint Realm? Asked Ding Xiaoyao in a heavy voice, and her voice carried a trace of pleasant surprise. After all, if Xianxia attained the Half-Saint Realm, then even the supreme exalts of the hallowed grounds could dream of killing him. A wisp of worry flashed through the Sword Spirit's eyes as she said, even though his foundation isn't bad, he's still too young. If he forcefully attains the Half-Saint Realm within experiencing consolidation of his gains through time and attaining various comprehensions, then while it would be enormously beneficial to him in the short run, it will plant a seed of disaster within him. Or I should say that it would bury many seeds of disaster within him, because his cultivation has truly been rising too quickly. The happiness in Ding Xiaoyao's eyes vanished when she heard this, and she said, is it very serious? The Sword Spirit replied, do you know why Nether Maiden is still at the Exalt Realm? Even the Half-Saint Realm wouldn't be impossible with the natural talent she possesses. However, she's still at the Exalt Realm because she suppressed the speed of her advancement. She wants to attain the Monarch Realm naturally, and then finally attain the Half-Saint Realm. In that way, her future would be limitless, and it would make her foundation extremely solid. Should we stop him? Asked Ding Xiaoyao. The Sword Spirit shook her head in response. He'll figure it out. Moreover, unless he's assisted by treasures, it's impossible for him to attain the Half-Saint Realm now. Ding Xiaoyao nodded lightly, and then she gazed at Xianxia. Her gaze carried a trace of worry. Xianxia's aura was still rising steadily. However, it didn't take long for his aura to gradually stabilize. The sword spirit nodded when she saw this and said, "He's still considerable composed and didn't try to charge into the half-saint realm." Meanwhile, the sword spirit's expression suddenly changed. She looked up into the sky and said, "Shit." The commotion he created was too huge. Someone noticed us 1 inch as soon as she finished speaking. She immediately formed a seal, and then 3 circular sword formations appeared beneath their feet. After that, they immediately vanished on the spot. Less than 2 breaths after they vanished, Supreme Exalt He, Supreme Exalt Mu, and 100 white-robed old men appeared where they were just moments ago, and their expressions turned gloomy when they noticed that it was completely empty. Search. He couldn't have gone fat. As soon as Supreme Exalt He finished speaking, all of them immediately tore space open and vanished on the spot. After executing 3 5-element sword flights in succession, the sword spirit finally stopped fleeing. The hallowed grounds dispatched a huge number of experts. Besides the 2 supreme exalts, there were around 100 mid-grade half-saints as well. Moreover, I even sensed an extremely obscure aura. That! Suddenly, her eyes opened wide, and then she looked up into the sky. The space there was torn open, and then a spear shot down towards the 3 of them. The spear was extremely swift, and coupled with the fact that it had caught them off guard, it was utterly impossible for the sword spirit to execute the 5-element sword flight technique. At this moment, Yang Yi was still seated cross-legged on the ground with his eyes tightly closed. He seemed to be absorbing the remaining energy within him, so only the sword spirit could do something now. As she gazed at the spear that was about to reach them, a cold glow flashed through her eyes. She tapped her right foot on the ground, and then she transformed into an enormous sword that shot into the sky and collided with the spear. Bang! A huge explosion resounded in the sky. After that, the sword spirit descended to the ground by Yang Yi and Ding Xiaoyao's side. At this moment, her countenance was ghastly pale, and her eyes were filled with terror. Ding Xiaoyao frowned. She was about to say something when the sword spirit had immediately formed a seal, and then all 3 of them vanished on the spot. At the very same instant that they vanished, a black-robed man who held a spear appeared where they were just a moment ago. "No one can escape me. Qi Jing, if I want to kill them." The black-robed man took a step forward, and then he vanished on the spot. Right after he vanished, the blind old man instantly appeared where he stood just now. At the same time, Supreme Exalt He's group appeared here as well. A wisp of surprise flashed through Supreme Exalt He's eyes when he saw the blind old man, and then he seemed to have thought of something, and he merely took a deep and long glance at the blind old man yet didn't speak a word. "Who was that? He's truly strong." The blind old man spoke abruptly. "A defiant profounder." "Supreme Exalt," he replied. "He should be one of the 10 divine generals. I just don't know what his ranking is." "Humph. No matter what his ranking is, he's more than enough to kill Yang Yi." The blind old man shook his head and said, "So many of us have actually set out just to pursue and kill a monarch realm profounder." Supreme Exalt He's face was quite unsightly. After all, it truly was a humiliation for so many to be pursuing a monarch realm profounder. Supreme Exalt Mu suddenly said, "Don't waste any more time. If we're too late, then Yang Yi might fall into the hands of the defiant profounders." Supreme Exalt He nodded in response, and then all of them tore space apart and left. The blind old man hurriedly followed them. The sword spirit, Yang Yi, and Ding Xiaoyao's feet had just touched the ground when Ding Xiaoyao spoke with shock. "Sword spirit, you!" Because the sword spirit's face wasn't just pale, her body was actually starting to become slightly translucent. "Flee! Why aren't you fleeing anymore? I haven't had enough fun." Meanwhile, the black-robed man appeared not too far behind them. "It's fine. I'll play with you instead." Yang Ye's voice suddenly resounded. As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed. At practically the exact same moment, the man swiftly swung his spear forward. Bang! Sparks sprayed from the tip of the man's spear, and it shook slightly while the ray of light dispersed. A wisp of disdain appeared on the corners of the black-robed man's mouth. Suddenly, his pupils constricted, and he immediately let go of his spear. After that, he watched as his spear transformed into dust. Meanwhile, Xianxia's group had vanished on the spot. A solemn expression appeared in the man's eyes as he looked towards the distance. But there was even more excitement and happiness in his eyes. The energy of the laws! What a kid! As expected of the person who those dogs of the hallowed grounds fear and have a headache over. This game is finally getting interesting. As he spoke, he was about to chase after Xianxia. However, Supreme Exalt He's group and the blind old man arrived here. Your hallowed grounds actually mobilized so many forces just to kill a single monarch realm profounder. How laughable and sad. The black-robed man glanced at Supreme Exalt He's group while his eyes were filled with ridicule and disdain. You aren't laughable and sad? Why did you fail just now? Supreme Exalt He spoke coldly. Even if it was a one-on-one battle, he still wouldn't fear this fellow who stood before him. Not to mention that he had the numbers right now. I just want to have some fun, replied the black-robed man. Supreme Exalt He laughed coldly and said, Then I'll wish you good luck. Please don't play yourself to death. If it wasn't for the Saber Emperor, I would want to kill you right now. The black-robed man stared fixedly at Supreme Exalt He. You think too highly of yourself. Supreme Exalt He said, If it wasn't for the hallowed Lord, I would make you die a graveless death right now. I'll allow you to understand that all of you aren't anything great once you've lost your undying bodies. Want to fight? Said the black-robed man. Bring it on. Supreme Exalt He pressed his hands together and was about to attack. Meanwhile, the blind old man's figure flashed and vanished on the spot. Both Supreme Exalt He and the black-robed man's eyelids twitched when they witnessed this scene. And then they glanced coldly at each other yet didn't attack in the end. Their figures flashed and vanished on the spot instead. Xianxia had the Stone of Suppression, and whichever side that obtained it would possess greater authority over the others when they cooperated. So, they naturally wouldn't allow others to obtain it. Xianxia hid beneath the ground, and then hid within the primordial pagoda. At this moment, there were 4 supreme experts and 100 mid-grade half-saints outside. Once he was locked in battle with them, then only death would be awaiting him even if he was at the 9th rank of the monarch realm. He hadn't imagined that the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders would actually join forces to kill him. Even though they hadn't joined forces openly, he had no doubt that they'd come to some form of agreement. So, Profounder Continent was in danger. Are you all right? Within the primordial pagoda, Xianxia frowned as he gazed at the sword spirit. At this moment, her figure was practically translucent, and it even made Xianxia's voice tremble slightly. She shook her head slightly and said, I'll be fine after I absorb some of your sword intent. However, I won't be able to help you anymore for some time. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief and said, I'm sorry. He actually felt quite guilty to her because she'd almost lost her life on more than one occasion because of him. The sword spirit said, I'm helping you for my own gain. You don't have to apologize. What do you plan to do now? You should have realized that the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders seem to have come to an agreement. If I'm not wrong, then they might attack Profounder Continent soon. Xianxia took a deep breath and said, It's still far from a hopeless situation. What? You have a backup plan? Asked the sword spirit. Xianxia nodded and said, I've thought of a way. While it's dangerous, I want to give it a try. The sword spirit said, You have no choice but to try. I'm going to fall into a deep sleep. I'll transform back into my original form. You just have to constantly nourish me with your sword intent. You can execute Heavenrend during this period. Your current strength should be sufficient to overlap at least 25 Heavenrends. Even a mid-grade half-saint might be instantly killed by that. As soon as she finished speaking, she transformed into the form of the ancient sheath, and it floated in front of Xianxia. Xianxia took it in his hand, and then his sword intent gradually converged into it. Be careful, said Ding Xiaoyao. Xianxia nodded, and then he left the primordial pagoda. Xianxia didn't return above ground, and he went deep into the ground instead. Around 4 hours later, a world of lava appeared in his field of vision, and he didn't hesitate to transform into a ray of light that entered it. In next to no time, A few dozen balls of flames that were at the half-saint realm appeared in front of him. "Take me to Xiaoying," said Xianxia. The flames they emanated blazed even more brightly, and they seemed to be issuing a warning to him. "Take me to her." Xianxia's voice was slightly heavy. At the same time, 12th level sword intent surged out like a torrent, and it pressured them to the point the flames they emanated dimmed down. Suddenly, Xiaoying appeared in front of Xianxia. At the same time, a few hundred balls of fire appeared in the surroundings. All of them were half-saints, and there were even a few dozen mid-grade half-saints amongst them. "Have you come here to give your life away?" Xiaoying floated over to Xianxia, and he instantly felt the temperature go up by a few hundred degrees. Xianxia withdrew his sword intent and formed a barrier around himself. As soon as he completed the barrier, the temperature around him instantly returned to normal. A wisp of surprise flashed through Xiaoying's eyes when she witnessed this scene, and she said, "You've actually attained the 12th level of sword intent in this short period since we last saw each other, and your strength has even become so strong. What a surprise! Where's Lei Lin?" Xianxia frowned, because he hadn't seen any sign of Lei Lin until now. Logically speaking, she would have definitely come here if she knew that he'd come. "I devoured here." Xiaoying looked Xianxia in the eyes as she spoke in an emotionless tone. Xianxia's pupils suddenly constricted while the sword intent within him even became violent. At this moment, there was only rage and killing intent left in his mind. Boundless rage and killing intent, especially when her image appeared in his mind. "It was I that did it to her. It was I." Xianxia muttered softly as if he'd lost his soul, and then he suddenly looked at Xiaoying. "I'll bury all of you with her." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia took a step forward while he activated the sword domain. Xiaoying's expression changed drastically when the sword domain appeared. Meanwhile, countless threads of sword intent shot out from within Xianxia. At this instant, terror appeared in Xiaoying's eyes. "The energy of the laws! You've actually comprehended the energy of the laws. Quickly stop. Lei Lin isn't dead. I lied to you." The crimson-red hue in Xianxia's eyes reduced greatly when he heard this. At the same time, his sword intent stopped spreading. However, it was still a little too late, and a few dozen balls of fire in the surroundings had been transformed into ashes. A wisp of fear and shock flashed through Xiaoying's eyes as she gazed at the ashes. It wasn't just her. The other balls of fire moved far away from Xianxia and didn't dare get close to him. A short while passed before Xianxia calmed down, and he stared fixedly at Xiaoying as he said, "Bring her to me." Xiaoying took a deep breath and said, "She's in closed-door cultivation. She's charging into the half-saint realm." As she spoke, she pressed her hands together before pushing them apart, and then the lava was immediately split apart. There was a palace at the end of the path opened up between the lava, and countless tiny balls of lightning were circling in the sky above it. Xianxia instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that, and then he gazed at Xiaoying and said, "I'm sorry." Xiaoying would naturally not be nice to him after he killed over a dozen half-saints of hers. She immediately said, "Since you know that she's fine, then you can leave." Xianxia hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "I came to ask for your help." "I refuse," she replied coldly. Xianxia laughed bitterly and said, "I really didn't do it on purpose. I was just truly unable to control myself when I heard that you devoured her." Xiaoying suddenly said, "Are you that worried about her?" Xianxia replied, "I treat her as my own younger sister." Xiaoying gazed at Xianxia for a short while before he said, "What do you need?" Xianxia answered, "You should be aware that I'm from Profounder Continent. Now, the hallowed grounds and the defiant Profounders are about to attack Profounder Continent. Based on the current strength of Profounder Continent, it'll definitely be destroyed by the end of the battle. So you hope that I'll help you fight them?" She interrupted him. Xianxia hurriedly nodded. He was about to speak when she suddenly stretched out her hand and pointed towards the side. "Leave right now before I change my mind." Xianxia was at a loss for words. She continued, "I really can't figure out why you want to fight them, and you even want to drag me down with you. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with you in the head?" Xiaoying continued, your current strength isn't bad. But do you think that you can fight the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders? Profounder continent wouldn't even be a match for one of them. So, leave right now. Yang Yi said, I've naturally prepared repayment for your help. I won't accept it no matter what it is. She refused decisively. Yang Yi sighed lightly and said, even something that can allow you to head into the outer heavens? He was tricking her because while he did possess primordial violet energy, even he wasn't confident that he would be able to enter the outer heavens in the future. Enter the outer heavens? Xiaoying's eyes narrowed. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Suddenly, a ball of flames flew over to Xiaoying, and then slight fluctuations swept out from it and entered Xiaoying's mind. A short while passed before she raised her head and looked at him. Do you know what has happened? Yang Yi frowned and asked. What? She said. The hallowed grounds and the defiant profounders have respectively dispatched 3,000 half-saints to the teleportation formation that leads to Profounder Continent. They intend to attack Profounder Continent. Profounder Continent, the territory of the Oceanic clans. At this moment, all the half-saints of Profounder Continent had gathered in the sky here, and their gazes were extremely solemn as they looked at the small island below them that had a teleportation formation on it. Elder Mu and Lu Yen stood at the front of the group, and a man completely enveloped in black energy stood by their side. That man was the demonic figure who was sealed beneath the heavenly lightning pool. We have no chance. A voice sounded out from within the mass of black energy. Lu Yen glanced at him and said, Fan Ku, don't tell me you're going to surrender? Surrender. Fan Ku laughed with ridicule and said, I was sealed by those bastards from the hallowed grounds and outer heavens for 100,000 years. Surrender? How stupid would I be to do that? Lu Yen chuckled and said, Don't worry. This teleportation formation can only transport 100 at a time, so unless all of them are top-rate experts of the hallowed grounds. Otherwise, we'll kill as many as they send here. What if the high-grade half-saints of the hallowed grounds are the ones that come? Asked Fan Ku. We'll just fight. If worse comes to worse, it's only death. Don't tell me that you're afraid, said Lu Yen. Fan Ku replied, Let me tell you in advance that if it's the top-rate experts of the hallowed grounds that come here, then I'll turn around and leave right away. I'm not afraid of death, but there's no need for me to die for your sakes. I'll always have a chance while I still have my life. Suddenly, a ray of blue light erupted from the teleportation formation below them. The experts of Profounder Continent seemed like they were facing a formidable enemy when they witnessed this scene, and they instantly became tense. It didn't take long for Supreme Exalt He to appear on the teleportation formation. The half-saints of Profounder Continent were about to attack, but they were stopped by Lu Yen. Supreme Exalt He glanced at the surroundings and laughed with ridicule. Is this all Profounder Continent has? Yet you dream of fighting against my hallowed grounds? How truly laughable. If it wasn't for the defiant Profounders, annihilating all of you would only take an instant. Don't tell me you came here just to brag? Lu Yen spoke indifferently. Supreme Exalt He glanced at Lu Yen and said, No matter what, we were once from the same continent, so we don't want to take things too far. I'll give all of you a chance today. If you're willing to surrender, then my hallowed grounds will let bygones be bygones. Moreover, we'll even allow the members of your respective clans and sects to enter the hallowed grounds. Remember, this is your last chance. If you let it go, then only annihilation awaits all of you. Many half-saints were immediately tempted. A cold glow flashed through Lu Yan's eyes when he witnessed this scene, and he was about to act when Elder Mu stopped him. Elder Mu shook his head and said, Keeping disloyal people with us is like a calamity waiting to happen. Let them go now. It's better than allowing them to stab us in the back when we fight the hallowed grounds. Lu Yen hesitated for a moment, and then he nodded. It didn't take long for a half-saint to step forward, and he said, My Clear River sect is willing to head to the hallowed grounds. As soon as that half-saint stepped forward, it didn't take long for another to do the same. My Endless sect is willing to head to the hallowed grounds. My Gu clan is willing. It didn't take long for all the half-saints besides the half-saints from the devil race, demon race, and oceanic clans to choose to represent their clans and sects to surrender to the hallowed grounds. Elder Mu and Lu Yan's faces were quite unsightly. They were aware that many would definitely choose to surrender under the pressure they experienced from the huge number of experts possessed by the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders. But they hadn't imagined that there would actually be so many. Profounder Continent had lost at least 70% of its half-saints in just this short period. So, how would it fight the defiant profounders and the hallowed grounds now? The smile on Supreme Exalt, his face grew wider and wider instead. He wasn't afraid of fighting Elder Mu and Lu Yan right now because he was standing on the teleportation formation, and he could leave Profounder Continent in an instant. Moreover, his actions had caused many people to become disloyal to Profounder Continent. So, if Elder Mu and Lu Yan were to attack him now, then it was very likely that those half-saints would turn on Elder Mu and Lu Yan. He was completely unafraid. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly stepped forward. Lu Yan and Elder Mu's expressions instantly changed when the old man stepped forward. "Even your Ding clan intends to surrender?" said Lu Yan in a low voice. The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Senior Lu, everyone has their own aspirations. I hope you'll give my Ding clan a chance to live." "Ding Yuan, Ding Xiaoyao won't agree to this," said Lu Yan. Ding Yuan said, "I'm the patriarch of the Ding clan." As he spoke, he turned around to face Supreme Exalt He, and then he bowed slightly and said, "Supreme Exalt He, even though we're not half-saints, we hope to be able to surrender to the hallowed grounds, and both fight and die with the hallowed grounds. I wonder if Supreme Exalt He is willing to accept us." "Of course, you are very welcome on our side." Supreme Exalt He smiled and said, "If all of you are willing, even those that aren't at the half-saint realm may come to the hallowed grounds with your clans and sects. All of you won't have to be in a constant state of anxiety there, and you don't have to worry about the defiant profounders as well. Because the hallowed grounds is your greatest support." Many people weren't able to remain calm when they heard Supreme Exalt He. "My devil race is willing to surrender." Suddenly, the half-saint of the devil race stepped forward and said, "I wonder if the hallowed grounds is willing to accept my devil race." "You're most welcome." It didn't take long for practically everyone from Profounder Continent to surrender. A short while passed before Supreme Exalt He gazed at the demon saint, and he said, "What about the demon race?" Lu Yan and Elder Mu gazed at the demon saint. The latter glanced at those who'd surrendered and said, "All of you'll regret your decision." One of the half-saints spoke in a deep voice. "Demon Saint, you've seen the current situation. We have no chance to win. The hallowed grounds merely wants to kill Yang Yi. We truly don't have to be buried along with Yang Yi." The half-saint from the devil race spoke as well. "Demon Saint, I know that you have a good relationship with Yang Yi, but do you really intend to allow the entire demon race to be annihilated because of that? The defiant profounders have emerged from the seal. If we don't surrender, then how will we fight them? Only the hallowed grounds can keep us safe." The demon saint shook his head and said, "I'll give all of you one last piece of advice. You should know Yang Ye's character very well. So long as all of you leave Profounder Continent today, then all of you will become his enemies. All of you've seen how ruthless he is against his enemies. Moreover, he will absolutely not give any of you a chance if you leave Profounder Continent." Yang Yi, Supreme Exalt, he laughed coldly and said, "He's only a monarch realm profounder. What can he possibly do even if he attains the half-saint realm?" Demon Saint, Lu Yan, the Undertaker, and every other profounder on Profounder Continent, I'll give all of you 5 days to consider my offer. If you don't head to the hallowed grounds and surrender in that time, then my hallowed grounds will flood the entire continent with your blood. We won't leave a single soul alive." As soon as he finished speaking, he started leading them into the teleportation formation. As he watched the members of Profounder Continent being ceaselessly teleported through the formation, Elder Mu frowned and spoke in a serious tone. "All of this is slightly strange. Based on the current state in this world, those beneath the half-saint realm are completely useless. Yet now, the hallowed grounds is actually even willing to accept those below the half-saint realm. That's really quite unusual." Lu Yan spoke coldly. "In any case, They'll face horrible consequences. Just wait and see. Fan Ke spoke abruptly. We haven't even fought yet, so many of your forces have left. We don't even have a fighting chance now. If you want, you can surrender to them right now as well. Lu Yen spoke indifferently. Actually, he looked forward to seeing the entire continent surrender to the hallowed grounds. Because Yang Yi wouldn't be tied down here if that happened. With the protection both he and Elder Mu could provide Yang Yi, they could still survive even if the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders attacked the continent. You seem to be so composed. I presume you definitely have a backup plan. I'd like to see what it is, replied Fan Ke. Then just wait and see, said Lu Yen. The hallowed grounds. The underground world. Yang Yi received news of it as soon as the members of Profounder Continent surrendered to the hallowed grounds. In a hall, Xiaoying said, "See? The defiant Profounders didn't have to do anything. Just the hallowed grounds crushed more than 70% of your forces. Moreover, they didn't even have to lift a finger. Do you think that you can fight the hallowed grounds and defiant Profounders now?" Yang Yi replied, "That's their choice. However, some still chose to stay with me like the demon race. I naturally wouldn't care about the fate of those who betray me. But how can I abandon those who are still following me?" Xiaoying gazed at Yang Yi for a short while before she said, "You really do surprise me. All right, since you want me to help you, I'm really curious why you're so confident that you'll be able to convince me and make me fight the defiant Profounders and hallowed grounds to the death by your side." Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment and said, "Xiaoying, do you want to head to the outer heavens?" "Who doesn't?" she said. "But I'm sorry, I don't think you have the ability to accomplish that. Moreover, I think that besides the method which the defiant Profounders and the hallowed grounds intend to use, there's no other person or method in this world that can break open the heaven path. So, I won't help you fight them." Yang Yi walked slowly towards her, and he looked directly into her eyes as he said, "What if I said that I can break open the heaven path? Would you believe me? Continue trying to trick me. Go on," said Xiaoying. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched, and he spoke in a very serious tone. "I can attain the Saint Realm," she spoke coldly. "Continue trying." Yang Ye's face darkened. He didn't waste his breath again, and he directly stretched out his hand and took her hand instead. Xiaoying's expression changed, and she was about to attack him when her eyes suddenly opened wide, and her entire body started to tremble slightly. "Quintessence violet energy?" As she spoke, she twisted her hand and grabbed Yang Ye's hand instead, and it seemed like she yearned for more primordial violet energy. However, Yang Yi pulled his hand away and said, "You believe me now, right? How could you possibly possess quintessence violet energy?" Xiaoying stared fixedly at him. Yang Yi replied, "That's not important. The important thing is that I'm not just able to become a saint myself, I can allow you to become one as well. So, do you still intend to refuse?" Suddenly, Xiaoying flashed over to Yang Yi, and then she grabbed him by the throat and said, "Let me become a saint right now. Otherwise, I'll twist your throat apart. Let go." Yang Ye's voice was slightly icy cold. Xiaoying stared fixedly at him for a short while, and then she let go of him and said, "It's impossible for quintessence violet energy to exist in this world. How could you possibly possess it?" Yang Yi said, "Nothing is impossible. As for why I have some, I can't tell you the reason. All I want to say is that I can attain the Saint Realm, and I can help you attain the Saint Realm as well. It's not just an empty promise. Allow me to attain the Saint Realm right now, and I'll crush both the hallowed grounds and defiant Profounders for you." Xiaoying's eyes burned with desire. Yang Yi shook his head and said, "Attaining the Saint Realm now will only end in death, because our enemy isn't just the hallowed grounds and the defiant Profounders. It's the outer heavens as well. After you crush the defiant Profounders and the hallowed grounds, would you be able to enter into the outer heavens? Moreover, can you guarantee that you'll be able to break through into the Saint Realm?" There was another reason he hadn't spoken about, and it was that he didn't want the outer heavens to be aware that this world still had quintessence violet energy in it. At the very least, he didn't want them to find out until he had the strength to protect himself. Once they found out that this sealed-off world had quintessence violet energy, then they would definitely not let the matter rest. At that time, countless saints and even more terrifying figures might come looking for him. Xiaoying fell silent for a long time, and then she said, "I'd still have an opportunity to become a saint after the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders annihilate all the living beings throughout the continent. Moreover, I wouldn't have to pay any price to get that. I just have to wait patiently until profounder continent is destroyed." Xianxia said, "But what if their pillar of blood fails? Or perhaps some other mishap occurs? You should be well aware that anything is a possibility. However, my quintessence violet energy is something that really exists. Moreover, you can forget about taking it from me or getting any ideas about it. Since I dared to reveal it to you, then I naturally have something to rely on." Her eyelids twitched because she really had aroused the intent to seize it from him. However, she couldn't help but feel hesitant. Xianxia was too mysterious. He was mysterious to the point even she feared him slightly. So, in the end, she hesitated for a long time and abandoned her intentions to seize it from him. Because the slightest mistake wouldn't just make her lose the chance to obtain quintessence violet energy. It might cause this madman before her to go berserk. At that time, her losses would outweigh the benefits. She remained silent for a short while before she said, "If I help you, then when can I attain the Saint Realm? 1 or 2 attaining the Saint Realm is utterly useless." A wisp of madness flashed through Xianxia's eyes. "If we're going to make saints, then it's best for there to be 100 or even a few hundred. In that way, we might have a chance. However, I'm unable to create that many saints right now. So I need time." Xiaoying's eyelids twitched when she heard that he intended to create a few hundred Saint Realm experts, and her chest that rose and fell rapidly revealed just how shocked she was. What sort of a notion was it to have a few hundred saints? If she hadn't felt the quintessence violet energy that Xianxia possessed, then she would really think that he was a madman. A long time passed before Xiaoying took a deep breath and said, "How long do you need?" "It should be enough when I attain the half-saint realm," replied Xianxia. She asked, "How long will that take?" "It shouldn't take too long," said Xianxia. Xiaoying remained silent. Xianxia continued, "In short, you can make your choice right now. Will you choose my side and follow my path? Or will you choose the pillar of blood that the hallowed grounds and defiant profounders are creating?" "Let me see the quintessence violet energy again," said Xiaoying. Xianxia nodded, and then he flicked with his finger. A strand of primordial violet energy entered Xiaoying's body, and she instantly trembled as if she'd been struck by lightning. Moreover, her face was covered in an expression of comfort. A long time passed before she gazed at him and said, "At the deepest depths of the ground are over 5,000 half-saint fire spirits that are in deep sleep. There are at least around 200 that are mid-grade half-saints. As for high-grade half-saints, I'm the only one. In total, I have around 6,000 half-saint fire spirits on my side. However, their strengths are inferior to both the half-saints of the hallowed grounds and the defiant profounders." When she spoke up to this point, she paused for a moment and said, "If it's possible, I hope that you'll give them a chance to attain the Saint Realm as well." "If it's within my ability, then I will," replied Xianxia. She nodded and said, "Should we set out for profounder continent right now?" Xianxia shook his head. "Gather your forces for now and give me 3 days. Right, do you have 1,000-year-old fire crystals? Give me as many as you can." She glanced at Xianxia, and then she waved her hand and a pile of fire crystals appeared in front of Xianxia. She said, "The thing we lack the most here are fire crystals. Not only are there 1,000-year-old fire crystals here, there are even those that have a few thousand years of age. However, while it's extremely useful to humans like you, it's useless to us." Xianxia felt his heartbeat quicken as he gazed at the fire crystals before him. Because there were a few thousand in that pile. Xianxia took the fire crystals, thanked her, and then casually chose a hall before summoning all his sword servants. Presently, he had an entire 1,300+ sword servants, and almost 100 were mid-grade half-saints while the rest were ordinary half-saints. Xianxia took a deep breath, and then he flicked with his finger. The fire crystals instantly flew forward and entered every single sword servant. After that, he placed them within a room in the primordial pagoda. At the same time, he sent all the primordial violet energy within the pagoda into that room. He was madly increasing the strength of those sword servants. Yang Yi was very well aware that he was forcing their advancement, and that it would be bad for their foundations. However, he had no other choice right now. If they couldn't attain the mid-grade half-saint realm, then they weren't even the slightest threat to the defiant profounders or the hallowed grounds. It would be the same even if Xiao Ying's half-saint fire spirits were included. After they absorbed the energy within the fire crystals and the primordial violet energy, some of those ordinary half-saint sword servants immediately became mid-grade half-saints. Yang Yi was very well aware that it was mainly because of the primordial violet energy. Even though the energy within the fire crystals wasn't bad as well, it was absolutely incapable of allowing an ordinary half-saint advance into a mid-grade half-saints. It was even to the extent that Yang Yi felt that the so-called quintessence violet energy of this world didn't possess such terrifying ability. He had no doubt that his primordial violet energy was much more superior than the quintessence violet energy, and it was at a higher level. After that, there was an ordinary half-saint sword servant that attained the mid-grade almost every few minutes. Yang Yi didn't waste his time as well. He was studying the 3 strands of sword intent he'd gained from the Sword Sect's founding ancestor. After all, he'd personally witnessed how terrifying they were. He was able to improve his strength by absorbing sword intent, and Yang Yi had thought about absorbing those 3 strands of sword intent so that his own sword intent could attain the 3rd level of the heaven rank. It was entirely possible because he was at the peak of the 2nd level. However, he still hadn't attempted to absorb them until now because they were very powerful. After all, they contained the Tao of the Unfettered One. The slightest mistake might cause him to be the one who was absorbed. However, Yang Yi decided to try in the end. Of course, he wouldn't absorb all 3 at one, and he divided one from the group and sent it into the primordial pagoda. After that, he released his sword intent and enveloped that strand of sword intent. The Sword Sect's founding ancestor's sword intent didn't try to dodge while under Yang Ye's control, and it didn't resist as well. It just remained there quietly. However, Yang Yi noticed that his own sword intent was actually resisting him. His sword intent had a mind of its own, and it instinctively resisted and rejected danger. In other words, it felt that the Unfettered One's sword intent was dangerous. Yang Yi could force his sword intent to absorb that strand of sword intent, but he didn't. He took a deep breath, and then started communicating with his sword intent. "You're afraid of it?" He received no reply from his sword intent, but Yang Yi was certain that it understood him, or perhaps it was asking him something. Yang Yi continued, "I've said it before. I intend to surpass the Sword Sect's founding ancestor. But if I can't even defeat a strand of sword intent he left behind, then how could I possibly surpass him in the future? I know that it's dangerous to absorb it, and it's very risky as well. However, it's very beneficial at the same time. Isn't it? Eat it and you'll become even stronger. If you don't, then you might not have another opportunity to improve." When he spoke up to this point, Yang Yi paused for a moment before he continued. "Anyone can devour something weaker, but only by devouring something stronger will you be extraordinary. We must be extraordinary." As he spoke, Yang Yi urged his sword intent to pounce on that strand of sword intent again. This time, it didn't resist him. Once again, Yang Yi witnessed how formidable the Unfettered One's sword intent was, because his sword intent actually started to disperse before it could even get close to it. The Unfettered One's sword intent was devouring his sword intent. Yang Ye's heart shook. Should I give up or continue? In the blind of an eye, a wisp of ferocity flashed through Yang Ye's eyes, and then he immediately urged all his sword intent to envelop that strand of sword intent. It was a war. A mad war between Yang Ye's sword intent and the Unfettered One's sword intent. Yang Ye's sword intent was at a disadvantaged position while the Sword Sect's founding ancestor's sword intent ceaselessly devoured his sword intent, and it was ceaselessly growing stronger under such nourishment. On the other hand, Yang Ye's sword intent was growing weaker, and it was even to the extent that he felt his sword intent was actually about to drop by a level. Should I give up or continue? Yang Yi didn't choose to give up, and he continued emanating even more sword intent. If I can't even deal with a strand of sword intent that he left behind, then how can I possibly surpass him? Xianxia's voice was ferocious while his sword intent surged out madly. Under the condition that Yang Yi stopped at nothing, his sword intent started to stabilize, and it gradually fought the unfettered one's sword intent on equal grounds. While the unfettered one's sword intent was formidable, it was like a plant without its roots. On the other hand, while Yang Ye's sword intent was weaker than it, his sword intent was endless while he was still alive. So, this gap between them naturally caused the unfettered one's sword intent to lose. Of course, it was because Yang Yi dared to attempt this. After all, the slightest mishap might cause his sword intent to drop a level. Time passed by slowly. 2 days later, bang! The hall which Yang Yi was in suddenly exploded into pieces, and then it was immediately transformed into specks of dust and dirt. Xiaoying had an extremely solemn expression in her eyes as she watched this scene from afar. After all, second-level heaven rank sword intent wasn't a huge deal to her. However, third-level heaven rank sword intent was a completely different story. It was something that could even pose a threat to an expert at her level. Yang Yi slowly opened his eyes, and then 2 rays of light suddenly shot out from them. Hiss! The space before him was instantly shattered into pieces, and a pitch-black spatial rift was formed. However, it didn't take long for it to vanish and return to its original state. Perfection in heaven rank sword intent. Yang Yi stood up and flicked with his finger. A ray of light shot forward, and then the space before him was like a piece of paper while his sword intent was like a sharp blade. It sliced through the space before him with absolute ease. Moreover, it continued forward while leaving a long and pitch-black spatial rift behind. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze, closed his eyes slightly, and then issued a command in his heart. Bang! Besides where he stood, the space in an area of 300 m around him was instantly shattered, and a huge black hole appeared around him, but it didn't take long for the space around him to be restored. Yang Yi was shocked in his heart, because he'd merely used his sword intent to suppress the surroundings. However, he hadn't imagined that just that would actually be beyond the endurance of the space around him, and it immediately collapsed. To a certain extent, third-level heaven rank sword intent is on par with the spatial laws of this world. Xiaoying walked over to Yang Ye's side and said, "You can give it a try. Make your sword intent merge into this expanse of space and see what happens." Merge it into this expanse of space? Yang Yi was quite puzzled by this. She's right. You can give it a try. Meanwhile, the sword spirit suddenly appeared by Yang Ye's side, and there was shock and pleasant surprise in her eyes. The unique trait of third-level heaven rank sword intent is its ability to merge with sword techniques, the space, the heavens, and the earth, and even the energy of the laws. Just give it a try. You're all right now? Yang Yi was delighted when he saw her. She nodded and said, "I didn't expect you to actually dare to absorb the unfettered one's sword intent. After all, his sword intent can be considered to be the strongest sword intent in the history of this world. What I didn't expect even more is that you actually succeeded. Because of that, my injuries were completely recovered after I absorbed some third-level heaven rank sword intent." Yang Yi nodded, and then he issued a command in his heart. His sword intent surged out from within him. He gradually noticed that his sword intent actually could merge into space, as they'd said, and it actually merged completely into one. Meanwhile, the sword spirit suddenly flicked with her finger, and a strand of sword energy shot towards Yang Yi. However, it suddenly exploded apart when it arrived 3 m away from Yang Yi. See that? My sword energy could have easily torn through the space before you. However, once your sword intent merged into that area of space, it greatly strengthened it to the point that my sword energy wasn't able to pierce through space at all. The sword spirit continued, "Of course, its true strength is far from just that." Yang Yi hurriedly asked, "What else can it do?" She grinned and said, "Your sword intent can merge with space, so it naturally can merge with sword techniques. You can merge it into your sword techniques when you execute them, and then merge that technique with space. After that, use the characteristics of space to attack. Try it. Yang Yi didn't hesitate to flick with his finger, and a strand of sword energy shot forward. After sword intent merged into that strand of sword energy, Yang Yi hurriedly did as the sword spirit said and merged it with space as well. After that, a shocking scene appeared. That strand of sword energy actually vanished. To be precise, it was concealed upon merge into space. Moreover, his eyes were utterly incapable of discerning that there was a strand of sword energy hidden within space. If that strand of sword energy wasn't linked to his mind, then he wouldn't even be able to sense it. The sword spirit explained, after it's merged into space, you can utilize the special characteristics of space. In short, you can make your sword energy travel straight through space and attack your enemies as swiftly as possible without using the Void Flash sword like you did in the past. Yang Yi issued a command in his heart, and then a stone statue which was over 1 kilometer away instantly exploded into pieces. It was even swifter than his attacks when he executed lightspeed. Tempestuous waves of shock surged incessantly in Yang Ye's heart. Meanwhile, the sword spirit continued. Once your sword techniques are merged with space, they become concealed, and you're even able to utilize the special characteristics of space. When you execute Heavenrend of the Tri-Apex sword technique next time, add your decay laws into it. Then, even Supreme Exalt, he might be instantly killed by a single attack from you if he's even slightly careless. Of course, if you fight him normally, and he takes precautions, then it's better for you to not even fight him. When she spoke up to this point, she raised her hands slightly and drew a circle. If you're using your sword intent to suppress your opponents in the future, you can merge it into space, the air, and even the spirit energy around you. In that way, it's equivalent to relying on the might of the world to suppress your opponent. Under such circumstances, ordinary half-saints wouldn't even be able to utilize 5% of their strengths, and even the ability of existences like Supreme Exalt, he would be greatly restricted. How powerful! Yang Yi took a deep breath. Needless to say, even he was shocked by the ability of his third-level heaven rank sword intent. If he were to launch surprise and sneak attacks now, then it would be absolutely easy for him to kill mid-grade half-saints. It was even to the extent that he had a chance at killing high-grade half-saints. While you're still not a half-saint now, even high-grade half-saints would absolutely not dare to look down on you. Xiao Ying continued, "You have really surprised me." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "While I can pose a threat to high-grade half-saints, I'm very well aware that I'm absolutely no match for them in a head-on battle. Of course, I'm not stupid enough to do that. Surprise and sneak attacks are the way to success." Xiao Ying's eyelids twitched, because if Yang Yi were to launch a surprise attack on her, then even she would have a huge headache. Because Yang Ye's ability to conceal himself was truly too formidable. Coupled with the fact that his sword intent and sword energy could be merged into space now and become concealed, it was even more terrifying. Yang Yi checked on the half-saint sword servants within him, and then a slight grin appeared on the corners of his mouth. He looked up at Xiao Ying and said, "You've finished gathering your forces, right?" She nodded in response. "Let's set out right now. People are still being teleported incessantly to the hallowed grounds from Profounder Continent. You might lose all of them if you're too late. Since they chose to surrender to the hallowed grounds, then let them. Why should I stop them?" Yang Yi spoke indifferently. Xiao Ying's heart shook. She glanced at Yang Yi with a gaze that carried deep meaning, and then she said, "So long as it's within the hallowed grounds, then you just have to say the word, and I'll bring my forces there no matter where it is." "You can do that?" Yang Yi spoke with surprise. She glanced at him, and then she turned around and left. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. "You fool. The area above ground in the hallowed grounds can be said to belong to the hallowed grounds and the defiant profounders, but the underground world belonged to her. While she is beneath the ground, she definitely has her ways to be aware of your whereabouts. So, she'll be following you with those half-saint fire spirits of hers. Understand?" said the sword spirit. "That's really not bad." Yang Yi nodded and said, "Let's go." She asked, "You intend to fight the hallowed grounds and the defiant profounders to the death right now?" Yang Yi shook his head and said, "They'll be attacking Profounder Continent very soon, and a battle to the death is unavoidable. However, I still have something to do now. What? A cold glow flashed through Xianxia's eyes. That defiant profounder who heavily injured you that day is definitely still looking for me. Don't you want to take revenge? He's a high-grade half-saint. The sword spirit spoke solemnly. While you've become stronger, it's impossible for you to kill him. I still want to give it a try. As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia's figure flashed and vanished on the spot. Is it because of me? The sword spirit muttered softly, and then she transformed into a ray of light that vanished from there as well. After Xianxia emerged from the ground, he completely dispersed his sword domain, and it didn't even take 2 breaths of time for the space near him to fluctuate violently. After that, a black-robed man who held a spear walked out from within that expanse of space. Didn't you want to play with me? Why did you hide for? A ferocious expression arose on the corners of the man's mouth. He was about to say something, but he didn't even get to finish before rays of white light flashed. A breath of time later, his expression changed violently because there were over 1,000 half-saints around him. Moreover, all of them were mid-grade half-saints. You! He was astounded, and he was about to say something. However, his cultivation suddenly dropped to the monarch realm. After that, all those mid-grade half-saints pounced at him. The black-robed man was a high-grade half-saint at any rate, so it only took him an instant to react. He moved both of his hands forward with the intention of tearing space apart and fleeing. However, he noticed to his horror that he was actually unable to tear it open. Terror and bewilderment appeared in the man's eyes as he tried once more. A gap was torn open in space under the might of his full strength. However, it was very small. It was only the size of a thumb. It was impossible for him to enter through such a hole. After that, there was no after that. The black-robed man was dead. He dead with everlasting regret. His eyes were opened wide, and they were filled with terror and bewilderment. Of course, there was even more resentment in his eyes. Xianxia walked over to the black-robed man, and he shook his head as he gazed at the black-robed man's corpse. Ganging up on others is the way to success. Meanwhile, the space all around him started to vibrate. Xianxia grunted coldly as he gazed at the trembling space around him, and then his sword intent surged out and merged into those areas of space. In an instant, those trembling areas of space became calm. Numerous horrified voices resounded from deep within space. Xianxia laughed coldly as he put the sword servants and the black-robed man's corpse away, and then he turned around and vanished on the spot. The black-robed man was a high-grade half-saint at least. Xianxia would definitely be incapable of defeating him in a one-on-one battle. However, the black-robed man didn't have the slightest ability to resist when facing over 1,000 mid-grade half-saint sword servants. A high-grade half-saints. With a high-grade half-saint and over 1,000 mid-grade half-saint sword servants at his disposal, Xianxia was confident that he could kill Supreme Exalt he if they met again. Of course, the precondition was that Supreme Exalt he didn't take any precautions. Otherwise, while Supreme Exalt he might be unable to fight his forces, it shouldn't be a problem for him to flee. Not too long after Xianxia left, a group of black-robed men appeared where he was just moments ago. One of them asked, "What happened just now?" Space seemed to have been sealed by some unknown force. What happened to Fifth Brother and the others? All of them died within the chaotic flow of space. Divine General Feng is probably dead as well. That fellow Xianxia might have a supreme expert by his side. Otherwise, with the strength he possesses right now, it would be utterly impossible for him to seal the surrounding space to the point that we couldn't even tear it open, let alone kill Divine General Feng. A long period of silence ensued. We underestimated him. He was able to survive the Hallowed Grounds attacks on numerous occasions. So, if he either has the assistance of a supreme expert or he possesses some sort of shocking trump card, no matter which it is, he isn't someone we can fight. Let's leave. While that pill is precious, we need to be alive to use it. It didn't take long for them to vanish from there. Xianxia traveled all the way south, and he arrived at the teleportation formation which led to Profounder Continent. There was a very tall stone platform not too far away from him, and almost 100 teleportation formations sat on that stone platform. At this moment, they were flickering incessantly as profounder after profounder from profounder continent walked out from them, and then they walked towards the plains below the platform. There was a dense expanse of people on the plains, and most of them were profounders at the King Realm or above. On a small mountain to the left of the teleportation formations was over 3,000 white-robed old, and Xianxia saw the supreme exalts of the hallowed grounds there. On a small mountain on the right were 3,000 black-robed people, and their auras were extremely formidable and far surpassed the hallowed grounds' forces. Both sides didn't attack each other, and they were watching the crowd from profounder continent instead. Xianxia was looking at them as well, and there were many familiar faces amongst the crowd. Xianxia fell silent as he gazed at them, but there wasn't even the slightest trace of emotion on his face. More and more people were arriving at the hallowed grounds. All of their faces were covered in excitement and wild joy when they arrived, because in their opinion, their lives would be protected once they arrived at the hallowed grounds. At the same time, they could enjoy the dense spirit energy in the hallowed grounds. Roar! Suddenly, a loud roar resounded in the sky. All of them looked over and saw a huge black qilin striding through the air, and there was a man on its back. The divine talisman master, Xianxia. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings. In the end, his gaze descended upon where Xianxia stood. Xianxia's heart trembled when he noticed this, and he was about to retreat when Xianxia spoke. Xianxia, since you've come, then why hide yourself? As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of dazzling light suddenly erupted, and then Xianxia appeared before everyone. At this moment, the gazes of everyone here shot towards Xianxia, and it included the defiant profounders. Xianxia! A ferocious expression appeared in Supreme Exalte's eyes when he saw Xianxia, and both he and the other experts of the hallowed grounds instantly appeared around Xianxia. They were about to attack, but Xianxia suddenly spoke. There's no rush to kill him. In any case, it's impossible for him to escape my Earth Energy Cage formation. Earth Energy Cage formation? Xianxia's brows knit together slightly, and he took a step forward. In an instant, a blood-red circle of light instantly appeared on the ground. The circle was covered in strange symbols, and they were flowing about while threads of mysterious energy flowed out from within the circle of light and symbols. In the end, all of the energy converged beneath his feet, and it formed a blood-red barrier of light that trapped him within it. Xianxia smashed his fist forward. The blood-red barrier of light droned and trembled slightly while some cracks even appeared on it. However, it didn't take long for the cracks to vanish. Moreover, the blood-red barrier of light grew even stronger and thicker. Xianxia smiled. It's no use. Not to mention you, even a high-grade half-saint can dream of blasting it open with ease. That can't be any better. Supreme Exalt, he spoke abruptly. Xianxia, actually, I don't want to kill you just like that, because a show is about to begin, and it would be even more interesting if you're here to watch. A strange smile appeared on Supreme Exalte's face. Many profounders from profounder continent recognized Xianxia at this moment, and an uproar erupted. It's Xianxia. While he has white hair now, it really is Xianxia. Humph. So what if it's him? He can't even protect himself now. Fortunately, I chose to join the hallowed grounds. I wouldn't even know how I died if I were to have entrusted my hopes on him. Brother Lin is right. Fortunately, we surrendered to the hallowed grounds. Otherwise, the day the hallowed grounds attacks profounder continent would be the day that we lose our lives. I looked rather favorably upon him in the past. Alas, I never expected that he would actually fall into the hallowed grounds' hands in the end. But it's good that he has. I presume that the hallowed grounds won't vent their rage on us now, and we can avoid him seeking revenge from us in the future. Indeed, he's an extremely vengeful person. Our actions are equivalent to betraying profounder continent and him. If he lives, how could we possibly survive with that character of his? Ha ha ha! Supreme Exalt, he suddenly started roaring with laughter. He pointed at the profounders from profounder continent and said, Xianxia, see that? These are the people you wanted to protect. How laughable! How sad! Ha 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 ha! Xianxia paid no attention to Supreme Exalt. He and he gazed at the Ding clan's patriarch, Ding Yuan instead. Xiaoyao won't allow you to do this. She isn't the one who makes the decisions in my Ding clan. Ding Yuan grunted coldly and said, Yang Yi, you can't even protect yourself now. So what right do you have to make us continue fighting with our lives for you? Exactly. Another half-saint from Profounder Continent suddenly said, Yang Yi, in the end, the hallowed grounds attacked Profounder Continent mainly because of you. If you didn't offend the hallowed grounds, then how could it have attacked the continent? Now that you've fallen into the hands of the hallowed grounds, it's an extremely good news for the continent, and it's the same for us. Because we don't have to die with you. Alas! The half-saint from the devil race suddenly shook his head and said, Yang Yi, no matter what, we wouldn't be able to fight the hallowed grounds even if we stayed with you, let alone the defiant Profounders. We have no choice but to follow the hallowed grounds in order to have a chance against the defiant Profounders, and only then would we have a chance at survival. Right? You can't even protect yourself yet want us to stay with you? You're truly quite shameless. The Sword Emperor? Tui, if you hadn't killed the members of the hallowed grounds that day, then perhaps we would have come to the hallowed grounds a long time ago. Yang Yi, you're the bane of Profounder Continent. He's right. If it wasn't for you, we would have come to the hallowed grounds a long time ago, and perhaps we would have attained the monarch realm with the resources that the hallowed grounds possesses. It's really quite laughable. He lords over the continent, yet he's a captive at the hallowed grounds. The most laughable part is that he actually wants us to continue fighting with our lives on the line for him. Do you think this is Profounder Continent? Do you think you still have two extraordinary experts standing behind you now? Open your eyes and have a look. This is the hallowed grounds, and you're nothing to them. Perhaps they were trying to curry favor with the hallowed grounds, or perhaps they had other intentions. The Profounders of Profounder Continent had actually started to curse Yang Yi, and it was truly a grand scene to hear the curses of countless converge together. Ha ha ha! Supreme Exalt he and the other members of the hallowed grounds were roaring madly with laughter, and their laughter resounded throughout the surroundings. On the other side, there was even some laughter coming from the group of defiant Profounders as well. Yang Yi remained silent and just allowed them to curse him as much as they wanted. He didn't feel any anger, and all he felt was pity. It wasn't for himself but for those standing down there. He sought to have a clear conscience whenever he did anything. He felt that he hadn't wronged them, and it was just they who had chosen a different path. Everyone had the right to choose their own path. Of course, everyone had to pay the price for their choices. He gazed at the teleportation formations. People were still appearing incessantly from them. Right now, the hallowed grounds seemed like paradise for the Profounders of the continent. More and more were arriving. It seemed like a dense ocean of people when he looked down from above, and he couldn't see the end of the ocean they formed. There were experts of the hallowed grounds guarding the ends of the crowd. According to the hallowed grounds, they weren't allowed to move around as they pleased, and they didn't provide a reason for that. However, the Profounders of the continent didn't dare question such a directive, and they just gathered together. Some stronger Profounders flew up into the sky, but there were experts standing on guard in the air as well. The atmosphere here gradually felt slightly off. Some Profounders from the continent felt that something was slightly off, and they intended to leave. However, they were forced back as soon as they tried to, and if they tried to leave by force, then the over 100 corpses below the platform was the example of the consequences. Not only was the atmosphere off, it grew heavier and heavier, because everyone felt that something was off. Suddenly, Supreme Exalt he appeared on the platform, and then he waved his right hand. Pillars of energy instantly sealed the teleportation formations, and no one could be teleported here anymore. There's a billion here. The show is about to begin. As soon as Supreme Exalt he finished speaking, the defiant Profounders on the distant mountain suddenly flashed down from it, and then they charged towards the crowd from Profounder Continent. The Pillar of Blood. Countless defiant Profounders roared with fury. In the beginning, the Profounders of Profounder Continent were bewildered, and they were stunned on the spot. Meanwhile, as soon as the group of defiant Profounders entered the crowd, they were like a huge pack of wolves that had entered an enormous flock of sheep, and a slaughter ensued. Everywhere they passed, they left countless corpses in their wake. They're the defiant profounders. Countless profounders were shocked and horrified. They didn't have the time to think why there were defiant profounders here. When they saw how unstoppable the defiant profounders were, all of them didn't choose to fight back. They chose to flee instead. Countless people fled madly towards the surroundings. Because there were so many of them, so it was utter chaos there. Many even didn't hesitate to attack the people in front of them in order to flee. In their opinion, the most important thing was to be able to flee. Because those 3,000 defiant profounders were like gods of death, and they were utterly impossible to resist. Because of the chaos, it could be said that they'd even started to kill each other. Many were about to escape. However, a blood-red glow suddenly appeared at the edges of the ocean of people, and it trapped them within it. Some immediately started attacking the barrier. However, they noticed to their despair that it didn't even tremble before their attacks. Even if they were attacking it together, they were still unable to shake it at all. Despair. All of them were filled with despair. Many chose to fight desperately when they had no other choice, and they turned around and charged at the defiant profounders. Kill! Let's take them down with us. In the beginning, only a few charged forward, but it didn't take long for countless people to charge towards the defiant profounders. One after the other charged towards the defiant profounders, but all they got in return was death after death. There were 3,000 defiant profounders at the half-saint realm, and many were even mid-grade half-saints. However, Profounder Continent only had a few dozen half-saints on their side, while the others were profounders at the Monarch realm, Exalt realm, and below. There was a huge disparity amongst the two groups, so the outcome was obvious. After they noticed that even detonating themselves was incapable of harming the defiant profounders, many profounders from Profounder Continent truly started to feel despair. Why? 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 Countless people roared hysterically with rage. They gazed at Supreme Exalte's group, but all they received in return were cold smiles. As he watched them from above, Supreme Exalte's voice resounded. The calamity of this world is about to arrive, and all of you shall play the part of using your flesh and blood to create a path for us that leads to the outer heavens. That's an honor for all of you, so why struggle? In any case, ants like all of you will have no chance on the path to immortality. Since it's like that, why don't you just get reincarnated right now? Hallowed grounds. Fuck your ancestors. Hallowed grounds. I won't let you go even if I die. Ah! Hallowed grounds. I curse all of you. I curse all of you to die a graveless death. All of you will die a graveless death. Ah! Countless people were overwhelmed with rage, and they gazed at Supreme Exalte's group with resentment. When compared to the defiant profounders, they hated that group from the hallowed grounds even more. The slaughter was still continuing. The defiant profounders were slaughtering all who stood before them, and they were practically killing over 10,000 every instant. Blood truly flowed into a river there, while countless strands of resentment and baleful energy filled the sky, causing a thin blood-red veil to appear in the air. Moreover, as more and more perished, the blood-red veil grew darker and thicker. Xianxia gazed indifferently at all of this, and he was very calm. It was just like when they'd cursed him earlier. There wasn't even a shred of emotion on his face. Xianxia! Suddenly, a voice resounded. Xianxia looked over towards the source of the voice, and he noticed that it was that half-saint from the devil race. He gazed at Xianxia with an anxious and regretful expression. Xianxia, I know that you're definitely able to save us. Please lend us a hand. The other profounders from Profounder Continent seemed like they grabbed onto that last life-saving straw when they heard this, and they gazed at Xianxia. Sword Master, we realize our mistake. Please save us. Sword Master, please save us. Many people knelt down. Ha ha ha. Supreme Exalte's roaring laughter resounded. He pointed at Xianxia and said, he can't even save himself, but all of you are actually asking him to save all of you? How laughable and sad. Meanwhile, the half-saint from the devil race stared fixedly at Xianxia as he said, Xianxia, I know that you're definitely able to do it, right? His voice was trembling, and it seemed like he feared to hear an answer that was unlike what he hoped for. Xianxia nodded as all the profounders from Profounder Continent gazed at him. Countless people started crying out of joy, and it was tears of joy from surviving calamity. Even that half-saint from the devil race couldn't help but smile. However, Xianxia suddenly said, "While I can save all of you, why should I?" The expressions on their faces froze, and then an instantly of absolute silence ensued. Xianxia continued, "One can do something against calamity that comes from nature, but one is done for if the calamity is his own making. Since the moment all of you came to the hallowed grounds, any relationship between us ceased to exist. To be honest, I'm even grateful to the hallowed grounds, because they allowed me to realize that I, Xianxia, am the bane of Profounder Continent. I'm a maleficent existence that brings only harm to all of you. Earlier, all of you said that the hallowed grounds is your savior. Oh, they are just over there. Ask them for help. Save them? What a joke. Why would he do that? So that they could stab him in the back?" Xianxia could excuse many things when he faced one of his own. However, he wouldn't put up with anything for his enemies, and these people from Profounder Continent were his enemies. "Xianxia, I curse you to die a horrible death." Suddenly, one of the Profounders from Profounder Continent roared furiously and charged at Xianxia. "Xianxia, since you refuse to lend us a hand, I curse you. I curse you to die a graveless death. Xianxia, I won't let you go even if I die. I won't." After feeling like they were rescued from a hopeless situation, they noticed that another hopeless situation appeared right before them, and it made many go mad. At this moment, they stopped hating the hallowed grounds, and they had even more hatred for Xianxia, who could save them yet refused. Countless people charged at Xianxia as they wanted to kill this fellow who was watching them die. At this moment, many of them were thinking that since he refused to save them, they intended to drag him down with them. When they charged over to Xianxia, they were stopped by a blood-red barrier of light, and they attacked it madly. However, they failed to break through it and could only look at Xianxia with resentment, and they used both their gazes and mouths to attack Xianxia. It was like the situation they were facing right now was Xianxia's doing. Humans. Xianxia slowly closed his eyes. Needless to say, he was shocked by the actions of these profounders from Profounder Continent. When a person faced a hopeless situation, the extents that person would be willing to go to would be constantly increased. So, that person would be capable of anything when that happened. "Ha ha ha! Supreme Exalt," he roared with laughter once more. "Grandmaster Xianxia, since they want to kill Xianxia so desperately, then give them a chance." Xianxia glanced at Supreme Exalt and then he waved his right hand and the barrier of light that trapped Xianxia instantly vanished. Kill Xianxia! Kill Xianxia! As soon as it vanished, countless people pounced at Xianxia. Hiss! A ray of light flashed, and then the heads of a few hundred were separated from their bodies. Hiss! Another ray of light flashed, and then almost 1,000 were slashed in half by the waist. At this moment, the minds of many cleared up. They seemed to have recalled what sort of person Xianxia was. After all, he'd once slaughtered an entire city in Profounder Continent. Xianxia held his sword in hand as he walked step by step towards them. "Come! Why aren't you charging at me? Didn't all of you want to kill me? Didn't you?" As he spoke, he swung his sword once more, and then a ray of light flashed forward and made a few hundred more heads fly into the air. Many of them were horrified, and they moved backwards incessantly. Meanwhile, some of the profounders at the front of the group suddenly knelt on the ground and said, "Sword Master, we beg you to lend us a hand. We'll do anything for you in the future." More and more were kneeling to Xianxia. A wisp of sadness flashed through Xianxia's eyes when he witnessed this scene, because they were truly beyond saving. After all, they'd wanted to kill him just a moment ago, yet not that they couldn't, they tried to beg him for help. Should they be saved? Could they be saved? Xianxia shook his head because he felt that they shouldn't be saved and were beyond saving. Not only would he have many more burdens if he saved them, they might stab him in the back at any time. Xianxia sat cross-legged on the ground with his sword held in his hand, and he slowly closed his eyes. Despair instantly covered their faces when they witnessed this scene. Humph! Meanwhile, Supreme Exalt he suddenly said, Yang Yi, don't act like you can save them. Let me tell you that they aren't the only ones who'll be dying today. Even you are going to die, and no one will be able to save you. As he spoke, he gazed at Shinemo. The latter understood his intentions. Shinemo withdrew a talisman and tossed it at Yang Yi, causing a blood-red barrier to appear once more around him. Yang Yi laughed with ridicule at the barrier, but he remained silent. Yang Ye's refusal to help them made them lose hope in being able to survive. All of them went mad, and they were about to fight the defiant Profounders to the death. However, Supreme Exalt he spoke abruptly, I can give all of you a chance to live. All of them immediately stopped moving and gazed at him. Even ants wanted to live, let alone humans. Supreme Exalt he laughed coldly. I'll reopen the teleportation formation, and people will teleport over incessantly from the other side. What all of you have to do is kill them until there are no more left. Only then can you truly join my hallowed grounds. Now, it's time to display your loyalty to my hallowed grounds. When a person was in despair, then so long as that person was given a slight chance at survival, it wouldn't matter if that person was asked to kill or even cannibalize. That person wouldn't hesitate at all. At this moment, the Profounders of Profounder Continent didn't even think if Supreme Exalt he was telling the truth. In their opinion, he'd given them hope. They were like drowning people who'd suddenly grabbed onto an aquatic plant. They wouldn't care whether the plant could really support their weight and save them. All they would do is grab onto it with all their might, because it was their last bit of hope. The defiant Profounders stopped slaughtering them, but they didn't leave as well. The defiant Profounders just floated in the sky above them, and every single one of them was holding a crimson-red sickle. Supreme Exalt he waved his right hand, and the teleportation formations returned to normal. As soon as that happened, people started appearing incessantly from them. All of those people were stunned on the spot when they noticed the situation here. Kill! Someone amongst the group shouted, and then attacks instantly covered the heavens and the earth as they smashed down towards the Profounders on the stone platform. Just like that, a slaughter continued. Yang Yi, please lend us a hand and rescue my Ding clan for Xiaoyao's sake. Suddenly, Ding Yuan appeared before the barrier of light in front of Yang Yi, and he knelt down. Some young Profounders from the Ding clan were right behind him. At this moment, all of their faces were covered in terror, and they knelt down with Ding Yuan. However, their bodies were trembling violently from the intense terror they felt, and some were even crying. Yang Yi opened his eyes and gazed at them, but there was only indifference in his eyes. I beg you, I don't ask that you save me. All I ask is that you can rescue these descendants of my Ding clan. Xiaoyao's younger brother and younger sister are amongst them. I hope you can save them for her. I bet you. Ding Yuan kowtowed as he spoke. Suddenly, Ding Xiaoyao appeared here. The members of the Ding clan were stunned when they saw her, and then they were overjoyed. Big sister. Save me. Save me. Xiaoyao, you're still alive. That can't be any better. Our Ding clan has hope now. Our Ding clan has hope now. Ha ha ha. Thank the heavens. Thank the heavens. At this moment, countless members of the Ding clan cried tears of joy, and it included Ding Yuan. Ding Xiaoyao's gaze descended upon Ding Yuan, and she said, I make you the patriarch because I attached importance to how prudent you were, but I never expected that I was mistaken in the end, causing my Ding clan to suffer such a calamity. A guilty expression appeared on Ding Yuan's face, while the other disciples of the Ding clan lowered their heads. Based on the situation they faced at that time, they would have objected even if Ding Yuan refused to join the hallowed grounds. It could be said that no one could suppress the people with wild ambition once Ding Xiaoyao was gone. Ding Yuan was about to speak when Ding Xiaoyao waved her hand at him, and then she gazed at Yang Yi. She didn't speak a single one, and she just knelt before him in silence. All the members of the Ding clan lowered their heads when they witnessed this scene, and even Ding Yuan was no exception. Yang Yi stood up and walked over to Ding Xiaoyao. He helped her up and said, There's really no need for that between the two of us. To be honest, I really feel quite uncomfortable when you act like that. Ding Xiaoyao said, I heard what they said before, and I know that they deserve death. However, I owe the Ding clan for bringing me up, and I truly can't just watch them die. Yang Yi shook his head and said, I would save them even if you didn't say anything. She was slightly stunned, and then she seemed to have thought of something. She just glanced at Yang Yi in silence. Yang Yi turned around to look at the members of the Ding clan. Truthfully speaking, since the moment they came to the hallowed grounds, their fate meant nothing to me anymore. They can die or live, but I chose to let them live. Because they are your family, and you'll definitely be sad if I just let them die. The members of the Ding clan heaved huge sighs of relief. Meanwhile, Ding Xiaoyao gazed at him but still remained silent. They can live. Suddenly, Supreme Exaltee arrived here, and he said, Yang Yi, I'm actually quite curious. How are you going to save them? I'm very curious as well. Shenemo arrived here as well. He sized up Yang Yi and said, if someone else spoke such words, I would definitely scoff at it. But you are no fool, so since you dared to say that, then you definitely are confident in your ability. I really want to know how you'll break open this formation of mine. Yang Yi walked over to the barrier of light, placed his hand against it, and then strands of sword intent merged into it. Break! Yang Yi spoke in a slightly loud voice, and then the barrier of light which trapped Yang Yi instantly shattered apart before the gazes of Shinemo and Supreme Exaltee. Yang Yi waved his hand, and he knocked the members of the Ding clan unconscious before placing them within the primordial pagoda. After that, he gazed at Shinemo and said, see, it wasn't very difficult. At this moment, both Supreme Exaltee and Shinemo had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. Both of them stared fixedly at Yang Yi, and a short while passed before Supreme Exaltee took a deep breath and said, Yang Yi, while I really can't stand the sight of you, I have to admit that you truly are an extraordinary genius. You actually comprehended third-level heaven rank sword intent at such a young age. You truly are extraordinary. Shinemo nodded and said, your natural talent is at the absolute top even at the outer heavens. Unfortunately, you were born in this world. Otherwise, your future would definitely be limitless. Yang Yi looked towards the teleportation formations. At this moment, people were still appearing incessantly from them. However, countless people immediately swarmed them once they arrived here. They weren't even able to see the so-called paradise in their hearts before they died. The veil of blood in the sky grew thicker and thicker, and the entire world beneath it was scarlet red. Meanwhile, the blood below the stone platform was already half a meter deep, and the dense smell of blood made everyone feel like they were in a pool of blood. Yang Yi hadn't seen what hell was like, but he felt that even hell wouldn't be much worse. The hallowed grounds was like hell in the world of mortals. They say that you, Yang Yi, are ruthless, but I don't really think so. Meanwhile, Supreme Exaltee spoke. You still have unnecessary soft-heartedness. The calamity is coming. Even if they don't die right now, they'll still die when the world collapses. If they aren't sacrificed now, then it wouldn't just be they who died in the end. Even all of us would die with them. I never expected that the hallowed grounds would actually join forces with the defiant profounders. Yang Yi looked at the defiant profounders in the distance and said, what I never expected even more was that their arrogant and unyielding defiant profounders would actually be willing to join forces with the hallowed grounds. Supreme Exalt, he said, in overall, my hallowed grounds strength is inferior to the defiant profounders, but if my hallowed grounds is determined to fight them to the death, then the outcome would definitely be one where both sides suffer heavy losses. They don't want that to happen, and neither do we. Everyone wants to live. So, joining forces was inevitable under such circumstances. Aren't you betraying the outer heavens by doing that? Asked Yang Yi. Betraying them? Supreme Exalt, he laughed coldly and said, looks like you don't know about the history of our world at all. Do you know that it was they who drove all the defiant profounders to our continent all those years ago? The experts of the continent during that time had no choice but to join forces and seal the defiant profounders in exchange for peace on the continent. But who knew that once the defiant profounders were sealed, those experts either died or vanished. In the end, we noticed that there weren't any living half-saints left in this world. Moreover, there was a so-called heaven path obstructing the path out of our world. Supreme Exalt, he took a deep breath when he spoke up to this point, and then he looked up into the sky. It can be said that those people from the outer heavens are a common enemy of both us and the defiant profounders. But what if the pillar of blood fails? If it fails? Supreme Exalt, he chuckled, but his smile carried a trace of ferocity and sadness. He pointed at those profounders who were killing each other and said, "Actually, there's no difference between us and them. Even if there's no way through this path, we still have to take it. Because it's the only path we have. Just like all of them who are killing each other right now. We have no other choice." When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at Yang Yi and said, "Yang Yi, if you were to ascend to the outer heavens, then you'll definitely rise to greatness with the natural talent you possess. So why fight us? Moreover, you're utterly incapable of stopping us with the strength you possess right now. So long as you agree to join my hallowed grounds, I can make the decision to spare you life and even let bygones be bygones." He had to take Yang Yi completely seriously when he noticed Yang Ye's third-level heaven-rank sword intent. Could be said that if Yang Yi attained the half-saint realm, then even he would really fear Yang Yi. No one could truly understand how terrifying a sword cultivator with third-level heaven-rank sword intent was. Moreover, that sword cultivator even possessed the sword domain. Yang Yi didn't answer Supreme Exalt and he just looked at the stone platform in the distance. Countless people were still emerging incessantly from the teleportation formations. Yang Yi felt quite lost at this moment, because he was very clearly aware that if they were allowed to choose on their own, then at least 90% of the profounders from Profounder Continent would choose the hallowed grounds. Even if he faced pressure from both the hallowed ground and the defiant profounders, he still hadn't chosen to abandon the continent. Yet now, the continent had chosen to abandon him. More and more were dying, and the blood here almost converged into an ocean. Bang! Suddenly, a huge explosion resounded in the sky, and it shocked everyone here. All of them, including Supreme Exalt, his group, and all the defiant profounders, looked up into the sky. At this moment, there was shock and bewilderment in their eyes. They watched as the blood-red veil in the sky seemed as if it was cut open by a sharp blade, and a gap formed on it. After that, 5 rays of light descended through it. "The experts of the outer heavens are here." Supreme Exalt, his face turned pale. 5 rays of light descended from above, and every single one of them carried a person. There were 3 men and 2 women. All of them were at the Saint Realm. However, their bodies were ethereal. Obviously, it wasn't their main bodies. Everyone here was petrified upon witnessing this scene, and the defiant profounders seemed as if they were facing a powerful enemy. Yang Ye's gaze shot over towards one of the women. He recognized her. She was the founding ancestor of the Flower Palace, Mu Hanshan. The latter's gaze had descended onto him as well, but her eyes carried ghastly killing intent. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze, and there was bewilderment in his eyes, because since they descended to this world, he wondered why no quintessence violet energy had appeared in this world. It wasn't just Yang Yi, Supreme Exalt, he and the others were puzzled as well. Meanwhile, one of the old men suddenly stepped forward, and he withdrew a huge pile of talismans before flicking with his finger. The talismans transformed into rays of light that flew up into the sky. "Evaluation talismans." Shinemo spoke abruptly. Yang Yi asked, "What are they?" Shinemo replied, "A type of talisman that can evaluate natural talent. It's very mysterious. I understand why they're here." Haha. So it was because of that. Yang Yi was puzzled. Meanwhile, a pillar of light suddenly enveloped Ding Xiaoyao, who stood by his side. Yang Ye's expression changed drastically, and he was about to act when Shinemo spoke. "Don't worry, it's fortune for her." Yang Yi was still puzzled, but he didn't act, because Ding Xiaoyao didn't seem to have been harmed, and she was merely floating slowly up into the sky. In next to no time, numerous rays of light flew over from all directions, and every single one of them carried a person. It didn't take long for Yang Yi to see some familiar faces. Nether Maiden and Nanjing, Xiaoyushi Mu Qingfeng, unseeing who was ranked at the second on the hallowed rankings, Lu Wanner, Fu Jingxian. In next to no time, over 100 people appeared in the sky. There were both men and women amongst them, and they only had a single similarity. It was that they were all peerless geniuses of the younger generation. The gazes of those 5 Saint Realm experts swept through all these geniuses. In the end, most of their gazes descended upon a Nanjing and Nether Maiden. What's going on? Nether Maiden frowned. The old man revealed a slight smile and said, "This world is about to be destroyed. Are you willing to head to the outer heavens with us?" She asked. "Why?" The old man seemed to be very patient and immediately smiled before he explained. "Presently, the thing this stellar region lacks the most isn't resources but geniuses. We paid a huge price to send our core spirits down to this world so that we can save the geniuses of this world. Fortunately, this world didn't disappoint us. Even though it has suffered from decline, it still has so many geniuses. Especially you and that little girl by your side. Both of you really surprised me." The others behind Nether Maiden and in Nanjing were overjoyed when they heard the old man, and many of them even started crying tears of joy, because it represented that they didn't have to die. Moreover, they would be rising in the world as well. Nether Maiden fell silent for a short while, and then she said, "What'll happen to this world? It'll face destruction." The old man's voice didn't carry any emotion. Mu Hanshan suddenly spoke. "Those who are willing to head to the outer heavens with us come stand behind us." In an instant, those geniuses hurriedly moved over to stand behind the 5 of them. However, there were a few who remained on the spot. They were Nether Maiden, and Nanjing, Xiaoyushi, Lu Wanner, and Fu Jingxian. The old man and the others frowned when they witnessed such a scene, because those who hadn't moved could be said to be the best amongst these geniuses, especially in Nanjing, Nether Maiden, and Lu Wanner. "Do all of you realize that this is your last chance to live?" said the old man. "I give up the opportunity." And Nanjing was the one who spoke those words, and she flashed over to Yang Ye's side once she finished speaking. Xiaoyushi didn't even speak a word and just flew over to Yang Yi. The brows of the old man and the others knit together tightly. Fu Jingxian came over to Yang Ye's side, and she gazed at Yang Yi as she said, "Thank you for helping me in the past. I'll remember your kindness." As soon as she finished speaking, she appeared behind the old man and the others. Lu Wanner bowed like a disciple to a master before Yang Yi, and then she said, "You won't be angry if I go over, right?" Yang Yi smiled as he shook his head. "Why would I? This is a fortuitous encounter for you. You shouldn't and can't give up on it." When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at Xiaoyushi and in Nanjing. "It's the same for the both of you. Don't be silly. This really is the only chance all of you'll have to survive. Don't say anything because I know what both of you want to say. However, you really don't have to accompany me through life and death to prove your feelings. Go over. All right?" They didn't speak and just gazed at him. Yang Yi walked over to them and openly grabbed their hands, and he said, "I know that both of you want to accompany me and help me. However, I really don't need it, because your strengths are insufficient to be of any help at all in this current situation." He hugged them and said, "Sorry." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi squeezed their napes lightly. A strand of sword intent entered them, and then Xiaoyushi immediately lost consciousness. As for Nanjing, her eyes opened wide, and they carried a trace of anger, but she couldn't move at all. Yang Ye's hand slowly moved up to Nanjing's cheek as he gazed at her. "I forgot to tell you that my sword intent is at the 3rd level of the heaven rank. I know that both of you will definitely not leave if I don't do this. Don't be angry. I'll definitely let you hit me and vent when we meet again. Trust me, we'll definitely meet again." As he spoke, he lowered his head and pecked in Nanjing's lips lightly, and then he held them in his arms as he went over to Ding Xiaoyao. Yang Yi was just about to say something when the latter said, "You don't have to knock me out. However, you have to promise me that we'll meet again." "We will." Yang Yi nodded, and then he led the 3 of them to Nether Maiden. "Help me take care of them. I'll owe you a favor for it. Will you be able to return it?" "Definitely." Nether Maiden gazed at him for a short while, And then she took in Nanjing and Xiao Yushi. I guarantee their safety while I'm alive. Yang Yi nodded. He was just about to leave when Nether Maiden suddenly pointed at him while she looked at the old man. Why aren't all of you choosing him? All the others looked at the old man as well. Perhaps these experts from the outer heavens were unaware of how terrifying Yang Ye's natural talent was. But the experts of the hallowed grounds and profounder continent knew. In this world, besides Nether Maiden and in Nanjing, Yang Yi was the third person with the best natural talent in this world. Since both Nether Maiden and in Nanjing had been chosen, it made them wonder why Yang Yi wasn't. Yang Yi gazed at the old man as well. As far as he was concerned, he should have been selected. After all, even those who were inferior to him had been selected, but he wasn't. Of course, he wouldn't leave with them even if he was chosen. After all, what would Elder Mu, Lu Yen, Su Qingshi, and the others do if he left? The old man looked at Yang Yi, sized Yang Yi up, and then said, a pretty good natural talent that isn't inferior to these two little girls. Why didn't the evaluation talisman choose you? The final question he asked seemed like one he was asking himself. The old man pondered deeply for a short while, and then he withdrew another evaluation talisman. After that, he flicked it onto Yang Yi. The talisman suddenly emanated a ray of light, but it didn't take long for the light to vanish. The old man and the others frowned. Even Mu Hanshan's beautiful brows had knit together while a trace of bewilderment could be seen in her eyes. The old man took out two more talismans and slapped them on Yang Yi, but they still vanished like the talismans from before. The old man and the others were even more bewildered, but Yang Yi had come to an understanding. Because those talismans had emanated a thread of strange energy when it was slapped on him. Obviously, that energy was evaluating his natural talent and potential. However, it had only just appeared when it was absorbed into the primordial pagoda, and then it vanished without a trace. There's definitely something strange about him. Meanwhile, Mu Hanshan spoke abruptly. It doesn't matter. Your natural talent is pretty good. You're qualified to come with us to the outer heavens. I refuse. Yang Yi didn't hesitate to refuse. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave, but he couldn't. There were many people he cared about in this world like Elder Mu, Lu Yen, Lei Lin, Yinin, Su Qingshi. All of them were still here on the continent. What would they do if he left? You refused me? A cold glow suddenly flashed through her eyes, and her voice was beyond icy cold, causing even the temperature here to drop greatly. I have things that I need to do. Yang Yi wasn't afraid at all and looked her straight in the eyes. Mu Hanshan said, the spirit energy within this world is on the verge of drying up. Moreover, all of you've committed such slaughter with the defiant profounders, and even the heaven Tao of this world has been killed. Do you know that it isn't we who want to destroy all of you and the defiant profounders now? It's the laws of the heaven Tao from the outer heavens that intends to annihilate all of you. All of you actually slaughtered billions. Did you think the wrath of the heavens is a joke? Did we have a choice? We were forced to do this by all of you. Supreme Exalt, he roared furiously. All of you trapped us here for 100,000 years just to kill the defiant profounders. 100,000 years. How many people could have attained the Saint Realm? But they stopped at the half-saint realm and perished because of all of you. Now, the defiant profounders have left the seal and a calamity is upon us. What else could we have done? We only want to survive. If it wasn't for us, your world would have been destroyed by the defiant profounders all those years ago. The old man suddenly spoke. Yet all of you are blaming us now? How laughable. Why waste your breath on them? The heaven Tao will deal with them. A middle-aged man who stood by the old man's side said, let's go. The important matter at hand is to discuss how to split these geniuses amongst us. Mu Hanshan gazed at Yang Yi and said, this is your last chance. Yang Yi shook his head and said, who's right and wrong isn't important to me. What's important to me is people whom I want to protect are still in this world. There are things that can be abandoned, but there are some things that can't be abandoned even in the face of death. You chose this. Mu Hanshan took a deep and long glance at Yang Yi, and then she transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky and vanished. It didn't long for the old man and the others to do the same. Yang Yi, Remember that you owe me a favor. Nether Maiden's voice resounded from high above. After the old man's group left, a lightning vortex appeared above the blood-red veil in the sky. A bolt of lightning flashed down from it and struck the group of defiant profounders, causing a shrill cry to resound as one of them was immediately transformed into ashes. After that, countless bolts of lightning blotted out the sky as they descended,